Hi everyone. Hi Ria. Hi Selena. Hi Noura. It is a pleasure for us to be here today. The theme for today is redefining social entrepreneurship. The physical and mental devastation brought about by the pandemic, as well as climate change, poverty, and inequality, have turned young people into pillars of resilience. So other, I mean, we can also call them young social entrepreneurs. And one, sorry, so young people are creating social enterprises around the world. According to the OECD, more than one in four social entrepreneurs in the West are under 34. Yeah. However, around the world, young social entrepreneurs are facing challenges such as lack of special skills, difficult access to funding, and lack of visibility for their businesses, among other issues. So today's panel, we are basically going to address some of those issues with young social entrepreneurs from all around the world who have initiatives, successful initiatives in their own countries. And well, I'm very excited. I don't know about you, but I'm very excited to learn from them. For the record, I am Mariam Nouriakone. I'm a global shaper from Côte d'Ivoire, Abidjan Hub. I'm a software engineer and a tech entrepreneur, and I'm training women into tech skills. My ultimate goal is to create the future tech talents of Africa. So let's start right away with the superstars of the day. Ria C, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone. Thanks. First of all, thanks, Marian. Hi everyone. My name's Ria. I'm also a global shaper. I used to be based in China, but now I'm in Singapore. I'm the co-founder of She Loves Tech, right? So She Loves Tech, we are committed to closing the funding gap for women tech entrepreneurs globally, right? When we started in 2015, the funding gap was at 2%. So only 2% of the venture capital funding goes to women tech entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, 8 years on, it's still at 2%. So we're working to change that. And right now, I run the world's largest startup competition for women, currently in 70 plus countries. So it's been a journey, but really, really lucky to find a lot of supporters and partners in different countries to do this together with us. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Ria. Ria basically is the boss of She Loves Tech, doing amazing things. Well, I also know that Nura is also has a foundation. Wow. I think that's not something that's very common. Can you tell us more about you and your foundation?
Sure. So good afternoon, and thank you, Mariam, for moderating, and thank you to Miss Foundation for putting on this important panel. So I did not start, but I manage Sagitas Foundation for Social Development. It is a nonprofit grant-making foundation out of Egypt. It's actually been in Egypt for 21 years, with really the goal of poverty alleviation. And we do that through two levers. One is education, and one is youth empowerment. So I'm very excited today because social entrepreneurship for us is very important, and it is an area that the foundation is investing quite heavily in. So I'm looking forward to this discussion and to learning from my co-panelists. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nura. All right, let's get to it. Go ahead, Selena.
So thank you for having us. I'm excited to be here. I'm Selena. I'm from El Salvador. I am a social entrepreneur and a Schwab social entrepreneur, and we address the root causes and consequences of violence. We're based in El Salvador, and we work in 12 countries. So we now have a team of 600 people in 12 countries, and we've actually hired 60 of our former students. So we run education, positive youth development, and we work on entrepreneurship and social, and getting young people involved also in becoming drivers of change in their own communities. Most of the young people we work with don't necessarily have access to opportunities, and they live in contexts of adversity. So I'm also really looking forward to this panel.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I guess we're gonna get started right away. I hear you. So, and when I hear you, I hear women who have a deep understanding of social entrepreneurs' challenges. So, if there is like three things that absolutely needs to be addressed in order to support social entrepreneurs, what would it be?
Wow, going straight to it. Three things. I think taking a step back, right? Before we talk about what challenges or what are the things that we need to address, we need to understand what social entrepreneurship is, first and foremost, right? So I am a social entrepreneur, but I'm also helping founders all over the world. And one of the reasons why I decided to do what I'm doing is not just because I want to help women, but because I want to solve the challenges that the world is facing right now. And we all know technology is a powerful lever for that, right? It's such a powerful thing that it's absolutely insane if you don't use half of the world's talent and ideas to develop more solutions to solve these problems, right? Now, thinking about social entrepreneurship, it's called social entrepreneurship for a reason. So you are an entrepreneur at the end of the day, first and foremost, but you are using your business skills, you're creating solutions, products, businesses to address social problems in the world. So I think it's easy, for someone like me probably who's really passionate to say, I have a issue that I want to solve and I want to just do it. I'm super passionate, and in the Global Shapers community, we're filled 10,000. How many members do we have right now all over the world? And all of us are really passionate, right? And sometimes as a young, entrepreneur as well, you have blind spots, right? Because you're so focused on a problem and you want to solve and change the world, and you forget that at the end of the day, you are an entrepreneur. So you need to make sure that you have a sustainable business, right? And so I think that is where maybe governments, people who have more experience could have a dialogue with entrepreneurs, right, to bridge that gap, right? And from the other perspective, if you're a government, you're someone who has significant experience in building businesses already, then you also need to know that the average age of the population right now, as the WEF has research, is under the age of 34. So that means that majority of the people right now in the world are the youth, and they will continue to be living in the world that we live in right now. So you cannot exclude them in conversations in building new businesses, building new solutions. And so this dialogue needs to happen with an open mind, with exchange, with mentorship, with advisory, right? And so I think to be more concrete, when founders start their businesses, entrepreneurs start their businesses, firstly, they need to understand they need to build businesses. And perhaps at that early stage, they would need to upskill themselves in business skills, and they could then go to people with more experience as well to get advice, right? And perhaps also get them on board officially as a board member or advisor, because when you're starting, that adds a little bit more credibility as well to the work that you're doing, right? And hand in hand, you could have a more holistic approach as well in terms of solving the issues that you face. So I think that's one thing. And I'll leave the rest for the rest.
No, thank you very much, Ria, because I think you touched on something very important that I want to maybe expand on. So I would say, just expanding on the definition that you use, you can also decide to be a social entrepreneur and go the nonprofit route, right? So you can decide that I'm going to set up a nonprofit to address social causes, or I'm going to set up a co-op to address social causes, or I'm going to set up a business. However, I think what we see, which is the point that you made that I love, is that a lot of social entrepreneurs come in and they're setting up a business, but there's no business fundamentals, right? And we see that a lot as a funder, right? So you come, they have a great social cause, and therefore believe that it's okay that my profits are not so great, because I'm going to solve the problem of climate change, right? So you actually have to have business fundamentals. You have to be a business first. You have to think about your triple bottom line, which is fine. And a lot of corporates already are doing that with the ESG, right? So you have to think, okay, it's profit because you have to sustain. Then it's people and planet, or however you want to define it. If you want to say, okay, then it's environment and it's social cause. But you really have to have a sustainable business because no investor is going to invest in you otherwise, right? So you can come to me as a grant-making foundation and say, I'm an NGO, fine, then you are my target. But if you're going to go to investor, if you're going to go to business, you need to understand how you're defining yourself. So I think this is what I see in the Middle East right now, that there's a lot of unclarity with social entrepreneurs as to who they are, right? What is the DNA of whatever it is that they're setting up? How are they going to be setting it up? And thus, who do they go to for funding? Who do they go to for board membership? Who do they go to grow their business?
Right.
And so that's really, I think, then if we talk about challenges, I will not get into that now, but for us, it's really the big thing that I think a lot of social entrepreneurs say is financing, and that's why I highlighted this reason, is regulatory, right? And then I think really depends on the context that you're operating in.
If I may add some small points as well, whether you go the nonprofit route or business, right, you need to be sustainable. Right. So actually when we speak about business, it's really just making sure that you're not just relying on external funding every time, right? Because that's why some nonprofits, whether they're social entrepreneurs or not, fail, because they're so dependent on external factors. And so you need to make sure that you are sustainable first, and then go on to, get funding or have business and so on. Yeah.
So we're a nonprofit too, so I hear
Right.
what you're saying. And we're a nonprofit, we started 15 years ago, and now our budget's $40 million a year. So we've grown a lot being a nonprofit, so not generating revenue to invest in, to give back to investors. So I think there are a couple things I would say to women. One is, at least the young women we work with, I think there's a kind of a paradigm shift also in women who haven't had access to opportunities. It's working on generating aspirational thinking. I think it's even starting there and thinking, if you haven't had the opportunity to access certain kinds of learning or people, I think we as women need to create spaces and where we can generate more aspirational thinking. And I think in the context of hopelessness or conflict, this is something that's really important. So seeing possibility. I think sustainability is tricky, because I think it's easy to say you have to be sustainable, but that can sometimes be at odds with the kind of idealism you also need to be a social entrepreneur. So, sometimes you need a lot of determination, and it takes a lot of time. I know the first 5 years we were like, you're about to throw in the towel. So I think determination, I think aspirational thinking, I think determination. And then I'll mention a third, which is being creative about how you try to develop your entrepreneurial venture, whatever that may be. And I think that can include, for example, doing things with the government, with public sector. And the other thing is intrapreneurship. So you may have entrepreneurial interests and do that within the company you're already working with or within an organization. I know we've incubated several people who want to start a social enterprise. So kind of, if people don't have access to those networks, become that network for other people, I think, as women in particular. So how do you become that network or that space where they can aspire, create something, and have the support that she or a group. And then I guess I'll say a fourth, try to do it as a team. I think if you can get more than one person, I don't do anything with Excel. Like, I'm not a business person, like you said, but I can build relationships, and my background's in public health and social work. So we don't always have to do it alone, and sometimes you feel like a social entrepreneur has to be a single person. So I'd say team up.
I think you've touched on a very interesting point, because you mentioned the ideal environment for social entrepreneurship to thrive. According to you, what would it look like to have a favorable ecosystem for social entrepreneurship to thrive?
I mean, I think, and I don't even know if when we started, I don't even know if that existed, right? And frankly, I don't know if in many countries it does exist yet. But I do think there are, if you're looking for investors, I think there are policy implications and government incentives for being able, or even like the mechanism that you can legally register as a social enterprise as opposed to a nonprofit or a business. That doesn't exist in most of the world. So I think you need the policy ecosystem. And then I think it's also people understanding what it is. If you don't know what a social enterprise is, I'd get people just kind of, I don't know about you, all of you in the audience, but eyes glaze over. You're like, what is that? What are you talking about? And I'm so confused, because you're, speaking kind of like business, kind of not. Or sometimes we're really aspirational, and they're like, you're never going to achieve that. So I think there's the government, but I also think it's that support network. And I think the support network is more intangible, but I think we can do that. Women, even if we're not social entrepreneurs, we can be part of that ecosystem for other women. I'm sure there are a million other things, but I'm sure you guys have other ideas.
Ria, Nura, would you like to add something?
I think we covered a lot of points already, and first of all, I second that. I've lived in, we operate in different countries, right? And one of the things I've observed in the countries that have a more thriving ecosystem for whether it's startups or social entrepreneurs or otherwise, it's really the countries that have a very, you could say supportive like government, right? Or in fact, like you could say it's even a top-down approach sometimes, right? The government sends a signal, right? It says, okay, this is important. And so it sends a signal to the entire ecosystem that this is something that we want to achieve collectively. And so whether that's towards a specific issue or otherwise, then the rest of the ministers, like the different local governments, they mobilize, right? And they create policies to really incentivize entrepreneurs to thrive. And I think government's participation is really important. But at the same time, obviously you also need other players, right? Whether it's a private sector or investors, I think that helps in this environment, right? Because each social entrepreneur has different focuses, and they also have different needs, right? Again, you could be a nonprofit, you could be a normal business, perhaps, right? That just focusing on social issues. So I think a more connected and integrated ecosystem is really helpful. So you need really a lot of opportunities for access. I think access is really very important, because if we're talking about young social entrepreneurs, of course, right? Maybe they're starting, they have a huge passion, they want to solve a problem, but usually they don't have access to the resources that they need to really scale, whether that's funding or not. And so I hope and I ask, private sector to open the doors for them, right? Because sometimes we see the young person in the room, you're quick to dismiss them, right? And perhaps you're thinking, oh, well, yeah, I have better things to do. So if we can engage and have better platforms for this type of thing, that's really important to access, right? That will provide open more doors. And I think you could say like championing, right? If you're someone more senior, whether you're doing the same thing or not, and you have the capability to champion or mentor a young entrepreneur, I think that's really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ria. And I have a special question for you, because I've been hearing a lot about funding and investment. So how can we encourage private investment, funding, and financial support for youth-led
Sure.
and entrepreneurship?
Thank you. So I love the question, because it relates to the comment that I wanted to make following up on Raya. So one, I think, again, when it relates to funding, this is why your model really, and again, I know I stress this point, but really your model needs to be very, very clear. We actually were just in a conversation with the Minister of Trade the other day on social entrepreneurship, and he was saying, as Minister of Trade, you come to me and I understand trade and industry. So I care about small businesses, and any Minister of Trade in any country cares about small businesses. They make up the majority of the economy. If you're talking my business language, I'm interested. But if I can't tell, are you under Ministry of Social Solidarity? Or this is not a language that they speak, right? So I think this is a fundamental point. Two, whether you want to talk to government, whether you want to talk to a private investor, you have to have data and evidence.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that is largely lacking in the development space, ourselves included. So as a foundation, Sawiris Foundation has really been investing heavily in evidence and data collection for our programs. I think in our parts of the world, we feel if we are doing good, it is enough to say, look at the pictures of the children that are now going to school, we're having impact. This is not impact, because you don't know, are they learning? Have you changed their learning outcomes, right? So as a social entrepreneur, it is not enough to come and say, I'm gonna solve a water, or look, here's now the village has water. Yes, at what cost? What was their alternative? What was sort of the control? So again, whoever you're going to go to, whether it's policymakers, they need to see KPIs, they need to see some data, they need to see you going, and even if you don't have it today, which I understand, you're starting, you don't have it, you're setting up your business, you need to at least have a plan to show, like any business plan, right? That I would say, those are just the 2 points that I really want to sort of, hammer in this session is, have a clear business model, or be a nonprofit, or be a co-op, right? So you know who to go to for your funding. And then second, invest in data, invest in talent, invest in evidence, so that when you go, you have some, because as a policymaker, it's not a conversation, right? You have to show me a number. As an investor, you have to show me a number, right? And so if you invest in that, then I think it makes the conversation one that can be much more impactful for the social entrepreneur. I think the scene in general in the Middle East, and I would say globally, is one that is very supportive of youth, is one that realizes that, youth unemployment is a huge issue, and where you also need, entrepreneurship, because there's not enough jobs simply even for everyone. And so I think as a principle, it is, the word, I'm a young entrepreneur, I'm a social entrepreneur, those are all buzzwords, but then you really need to have the substance beyond that, so it'll get you in the door. But then if you don't have the substance, it's very tough to go beyond, that initial conversation.
And can I add super quickly? Getting data is expensive,
Very
so find
expensive.
partners.
Yeah, very
Universities
expensive.
love research.
Yeah.
So partner with a university, and they'll help you get the data. They'll evaluate. Graduate students have to do theses, so other people
Absolutely.
can help you get the data, which then you can use to support your case.
It takes a lot of time as well. So it's
It's-
expensive in terms of cost and time
and
and
hard,
talent. Yeah,
and hard.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so the advice that I hear here is that a social enterprise or basically a social business is still a business. It has to make sense financially. Even when you're trying to raise funds, it has to make sense for the people who are going to be giving you the money. It has to be very clear. You have to be able to, let's say, show the data, explain why your enterprise is something that is needed and that will be sustainable in the long run. Even if you're starting, it has to make sense in the environment you're trying to create that business, if I get it right. Ria, will you want to add something?
Well, I think we covered everything at this point for those two things, but I think, if we're trying to encourage like young people as well, I endeavor everyone to really think about the problem they're trying to solve as well, right? Because we're tackling a lot of the nonprofit side of things already, maybe I'll tackle it from like a business, right? So I help a lot of founders, for example. And I remember in the early days, one of the, even for me, right, one of the most, I remember like it was eye-opening kind of thought, and at that time I also thought, wow, that's such a common sense. How come people don't do that, right? And essentially, we were speaking with Peter Diamandis, who is known as like the father of innovator, and he said one line, and I still remember to this day. And he was saying that if you want to be a millionaire, help a million people. So if you think about it from a perspective of building businesses, then find a problem that can help a million people, right? Even if you just charge them $1, you're a millionaire already, if that's your goal, of course. But if you're thinking about helping people, right? I mean, there are a lot of problems in the world that, don't just like make businesses for no one, right? Make businesses for a million people that can help a million people, right? And in helping them, you're also making money yourself, right? So I think that's really important. So find the problem, and the rest will follow. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ria. I think we're getting closer to the end of this panel, but I have one last question for you all. So what can stakeholders actually do to help young social entrepreneurs create a better world? What stakeholders, by stakeholders I mean everyone, could be banks, could be governments, could be anyone. Would like to start?
I'm happy to start. I would say two things. I think one is education. And I think education at large and investing in education that, includes, entrepreneurship, social responsibility, environment, so that, the generation that's coming even has that on their mind. I think we see that youth now care a lot more about the environment, but I think it's something that if we're educated on from earlier, you'll see more of that happening. So I would say that this is one. And then second, I think financial institutions have a great role to play when it comes to financial literacy. And so I think financial literacy is very different from education. So you see very well-educated people that are really not very financial literate. It is empowering for women, for families, but it's also very empowering when you come to set up a business. So a lot of what we do in supporting micro-entrepreneurs has to do with financial literacy for them. And then we definitely see, ripple effects towards their family and even how they manage their family and family finances.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Selena?
Yeah, I would say, and I just got back from a really interesting session with Schwab Foundation, and I think, again, you want to reach a million people. I think government is sometimes the best way to reach a million people. So I would say, let's find ways to identify how we can help government achieve their goals in education and health, whatever the sector is, in technology. So because then you can generate consensus. So if we all want people to be more literate in tech and finance, if we all want less violence, whatever it is, typically we have the same goal, even if we don't agree on how to get there. So I'd say identify a goal that or identify a way, when you were saying, like, align it somehow, because in the end there are alignments that may surprise us. That way we can innovate also within a system and support a broader system, because then you can reach even more people. And I think, so the ecosystems, that being said, government has to be willing to listen and start opening up to innovators. And that's not easy, because we can experiment, a government institution can't. So we need to do more of that. So but we do need to establish that conversation and the rapport that's constructive in order to be able to innovate. And then later, your solution may be accessible to many more people. So I think that's important, but there has to be like the openness on the side of the government. And then I also, again, and I just want to underscore entrepreneurship. So people who are in, young people now get bored at work. This is like, I don't like this, there's no purpose, I hate my job. So you know what, instead of quitting, find a way to be an entrepreneur within where you are. And as bosses, I think private sector can allow people to be entrepreneurs, because at the end of the day, there was an example, a woman from a big insurance company from AXA was telling us that she's an entrepreneur, and she ended up generating much more revenue for the company, right? So I think it's opening up in all directions and finding a way to achieve mutually interesting or important goals that we all think are important.
Amazing. So what I get from what both of you are saying is basically one of the main things that the youth needs is basically digital literacy and financial literacy, because those things are different. Education generally, but those things specifically. And also the openness from the government to be willing to collaborate and facilitate the process of running those social entrepreneurships. Ria?
Actually, I want to build on both of what they said, because I really do think there needs to be an education reform. I mean, at the end of the day, we need people to build solutions for everything, right? We can't just rely on certain groups and just be workers, quote unquote, right? I think being an entrepreneur, right, whether it's in your company or you want to start something completely new, it's a spirit that we all need to learn, right? And personal example, when I went to school, like my high school and also like the university that I went to was very big on servant leadership, right? And so a lot of the things that we were doing, we were learning marketing, but they asked us to kind of build a product with a particular social aspect to it, right? I'm not learning impact, like building an impact business, right? I learned business, but they incorporated a lot of those things. And at that time, I didn't think that, I was gonna graduate and build a social enterprise. But I carried that like along the years, and a few years later, surprised myself, became a social entrepreneur. But in hindsight, all of those kind of helped me, right? A lot of the things I learned over the years, I carried that with me, and no matter where I was, I think I was, being entrepreneurial. And when I decided, when I got, maybe a light bulb moment, like thinking I want to solve this, then it was easier as well, right? And also I was, I think, very in touch with society and really knowing like what the challenges are and everything, and that was due to the education that I received. And so I think it's important to incorporate like topics like this, right? And subjects like this in school. And on top of that, I think it's also to make sure that the things that we learn in school, they teach it to us in a way, in a matter of practicality and usability. Because we learn about concepts, but we don't really learn about how we actually use it in practice. I have to say I learned like calculus, like math, all these things, but first of all, I don't use it now. But also like, what is the practical, unless you go into research to that respect, I think it's really important, right? Because, I mean, what's the purpose of learning all these things, right? It's to, I would like to say, contribute to society, continue to grow it, continue to live in the world. And so we need to be in touch with a lot of that and not just learn things non-purposely, right? And finally, I also would like to comment on what was said about working with government, right? Because, as entrepreneurs, you're quicker to iterate, so it's the perfect chance to pilot things, right? And I was at the WEF yesterday, and I attended the session on the Saudi panel actually, and it was very in line with this, very interesting, because I found out that the current Minister of Communications in Saudi used to be a beneficiary of the foundation, the MIS Foundation. And at that time, I suppose he was sent to a program, and he decided to be an entrepreneur, right? And he built this health tech startup. And after a while, it now became like a platform that the entire government uses, and they're scaling it. And now he's the Minister of like Communications. So I thought that kind of like program, that cultivation, piloting the small thing and then scaling it at a government level, that was really interesting, right? And I think that's a model that a lot of countries and other places can emulate. And yeah, so I think those are a few things.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ria. Thank you so much, Nora. Thank you so much, Selena. I feel like I have learned a lot as well, listening to you, sharing your experiences. I think what we can take away from this is definitely that in order for social entrepreneurs to thrive, we need the implication of various stakeholders. We need to understand that it is actually for the social good, and it's to make the world a better place. And for that to happen, everyone needs to be involved. Everyone needs to see the good in this. And I am wondering if you have any questions from the participants.
Very nice audience.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yes, you're being too kind with the speakers. I would ask really hard questions, but thank you so much. Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank you so much.
Great to
Thank you.
finally
Yeah.
meet you.